everybody. It's Angie Rupert, founder of Rupert Law Group. We handle exclusively E2 and E1 visas, so no matter what treaty country you're from or where you want to be, we can help. Today, I would like to take just a moment, of course, to ask you to like and subscribe if you find these videos useful. And of course, if you have any friends or family who are interested in an E2 or an E1 visa, please feel free to pass along this video. So let's get started on the topic of the day, which is how can I have two investors and get the E2 visa for two people? Right? Not family members, two separate investors. So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, is it possible? Yes, it is. So in order to do it, the most important thing is that you have 50-50 ownership. So there can be no third owner if both owners want E2 visas. Okay, so in many cases, you will need to have, we always recommend that you have 51% ownership if you were to have a US citizen partner or another partner that doesn't want the E2 visa for whatever reason. We recommend a 51% ownership. In the case of having two investors getting separate two visas, you will each need to have 50% of the ownership. So there could be no third owner at all. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, how do we show control over the business? Well, it's something called negative control, and we talk about that in the cover letter that we would write for the two investors. Okay, so really important note, each investor must own 50% of the company, no third owners at all. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, you need to make sure that each investor has his or her own source of funds. Okay, this is incredibly important. So if you have two investors, let's say from Canada, right? And they each own 50% of the US entity and they're going to invest in that entity. They need to each have their own set of funds, their own source of funds. So if we have investor one and investor one has $200,000 to invest. Investor two has no money to invest, but investor one gives investor two $100,000, then they put it in. No, doesn't work. Investor one and investor two need to have separate sources of funds. Okay, so investor one got a gift from his grandmother. Investor two had sold a house that she owned in Toronto. Great, we're great. But investor one and investor two cannot be sharing money. The source cannot be a shared source, right? So make sure that that is the case if you have two investors wanting two E2 visas. Now, what about the amount of money that's needed to be invested if you have two investors? So we're going to look at the treaty country. So both investors from the same country, right? So we have two investors, they're both from Australia. Okay, in that case, I usually recommend a minimum of $85,000 per investor. Now, of course, we always go back to that thing. If they're buying a business that's worth more than $170,000, then they'll each need to invest more than that. Okay. But for something that is a minimal investment, you're going to need to each invest $85,000. And if you're from the same country, right? So if you're from different countries, let's say one investor is from Australia, one investor is from France. You can do that. Each investor owns 50% of the entity. They come from different countries, but in that case, your source of funds needs to be at least $100,000, right? Because the money's coming from separate countries. So sometimes that makes it a little bit, different, and I would advise that you invest more. Finally, something to know about the investment amount, right? So in the case of 50-50 ownership, the investment should really be about 50-50 as well, right? We don't want one investor investing $500,000 and one investor investing $100,000. They should be about the same amount. Does it need to be to the cent? No. We recently had a case where we had two investors from Australia, actually, and they invested something like $6,000 different because that's just the way that it all worked out, right? They put the money into the account and things were spent and they were about $6,000 different, but that's really close, right? When we're talking about a $200,000 investment, one person invested $3,000 or $4,000 more, one invested $3,000 or $4,000 less, and now we're at $6,000, but we're essentially there. But we don't want, again, someone investing 300,000 and someone investing 110,000, right? That's too far off. We have 50-50 ownership. We need about 50-50 investment, okay? So those are the tips and the tricks. Obviously, there are a lot more documents that we need. We'd be thrilled to talk to you about that. But if you and someone you know want E2 visas for the same business, give us a call. We'd love to speak with you about your E2 visa.